For years, I endured the grueling monotony of double shifts, skeletal meals, and nights spent in silence. All to secure a brighter horizon for my only daughter, Madison. She was my pride, the embodiment of every sacrifice I made. Each dollar I withheld from myself was invested into her education, her dreams, her future. When she married Brandon, a man whose charisma was eclipsed only by his irresponsible indulgence, I tried to trust her choice. I prayed he would steady himself, mature into a partner worthy of her. But soon, whispers of mounting debts slithered into my ears. Creditors, missed payments, promises unfulfilled. At first, Madison approached me delicately, her voice trembling with hesitation. "Mom, could you help cover a few bills until Brandon's project takes off?" I complied, though my own cupboards grew bare. I gave because that's what mothers do. But one evening, the pretense of humility was gone. Madison stood in my modest living room, her arms folded, her eyes cold as steel. "Mom, you must pay off Brandon's loan. It's your duty. If you refuse, we'll lose everything." I stared at her, at the stranger who bore my daughter's face. My lips quivered, my voice faltered. "Madison, I survive on a pension. My medicine, my rent, do you not see?" Her retort sliced me open. "Don't hide behind excuses. If you loved me, you'd find a way. Otherwise, stop calling yourself my mother." The words hung heavy, venomous. That night, as the moonlight draped my solitary walls, I realized Madison no longer regarded me as her mother, only as an obligation, a source of money to be drained. And in that bitter silence, a resolution crystallized within me. I would vanish. Without farewell, without trace. No more demands. No more exploitation. No more breaking myself for a daughter who had already discarded me. The following morning, I awoke with a clarity I hadn't felt in decades. The sting of Madison's accusation still pulsed through my veins, but beneath it lurked something far more potent. Liberation. Years of servitude to her needs had left me hollow, but now I had one final, unspent currency: my freedom. I moved through my home in a trance, dismantling the fragile scaffolding of my old life. Bank accounts were consolidated into a single, discreet fund. My name was quietly removed from the lease of the apartment I had lived in for 30 years. I even changed my cell phone number, each digital deletion feeling like a thread severed from the web that bound me. At dusk, I packed a single suitcase. No more, no less. Inside were only the essentials: a few changes of clothes, my passport, the tarnished silver locket my late husband Jonathan had given me on our wedding day, and a photograph of Madison as a child, her face radiant and uncorrupted by greed. Before leaving, I wrote a note. Just one line, scrawled in deliberate, unshaking handwriting: "Madison, you've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Goodbye." I placed it on the kitchen counter, under the magnet shaped like a sunflower she'd given me years ago. Then, without ceremony, I walked out the door. The click of the lock behind me felt like the closing of a coffin. 2 hours later, I was on a Greyhound bus headed for Savannah, Georgia. A city where no one knew my name, my face, or my sacrifices. I stared out the window as the world blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow. As the bus groaned southward, I pressed my palm to the cool glass and whispered to the night, "No one will find me now." Yet, even in my new anonymity, a single, persistent question gnawed at me. What would become of Madison without my lifeline? Would she crumble under the weight of her own decisions? Or would she rise, finally, to stand on her own 2 feet? I did not know. And for the first time in my life, I told myself it was no longer my concern. Savannah embraced me like a stranger's lullaby, unfamiliar, yet oddly comforting. I rented a modest attic room above a crumbling Victorian inn, its windows overlooking moss-draped oaks that swayed with ghostly elegance in the humid wind. The innkeeper, a kindly widow named Mrs. Caldwell, asked no questions, and I offered no answers. Each day, I reinvented myself in silence. I took long walks along River Street, listening to the echo of my own footsteps against the cobblestones. I read books I had long neglected: Poe, Hawthorne, and Dickinson. Words that wrapped around me like forgotten friends. For the first time in decades, my hours belonged solely to me. Yet at night, the ghosts arrived. In the solitude of my room, I heard Madison's voice, sharp, demanding, unrelenting. Her words replayed endlessly. "You owe me, mother. You owe me everything." They pierced my peace like shards of broken glass. One evening, as I sat beneath the flickering lamplight, I unfolded the photograph of her as a child. Ribbons in her hair, a toothless grin stretched across her tiny face. Tears welled, unbidden. I whispered her name into the silence, a prayer swallowed by the night. "Madison, where did I lose you? Or perhaps, where did you lose yourself?" Still, I resisted the temptation to call, to write, to return. For to reappear would be to undo the single act of defiance that had given me back my soul. Weeks slipped into months, and gradually the heaviness in my chest began to ease. I learned to savor small joys. The warmth of southern coffee on my tongue, the laughter of strangers on the street, the serenity of being unseen. But one humid afternoon, as the cicadas droned outside, I received a letter forwarded by the bank to my new P.O. box. My hands trembled as I tore it open. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Madison. Her words bled across the page, desperate, pleading, and venomous all at once. "Mother, how could you vanish like a coward? Do you understand what you've done to me? I am drowning in debts, and everyone blames me. They whisper that I used you up, that I destroyed you. Come back, fix this. You are the reason I'm suffering. You owe me." I let the letter slip from my fingers to the floor, where it lay like a dead thing. And in that moment, I knew she had not changed. The letter haunted me, even as I tried to consign it to oblivion. Its words festered like an open wound, echoing in the stillness of my rented room. For days, I could scarcely bring myself to touch it again, though I knew every phrase by heart. Madison's handwriting had always been bold, defiant, the scrawl of someone who believed the world bent to her will. Yet beneath her fury, I detected something more corrosive. Desperation. She was cornered, suffocating under the weight of choices that were no longer mine to salvage. And still, a part of me wavered. The maternal instinct, long abused, still whispered treacherously in my ear, "She is your daughter. If you do not answer, who will?" But I silenced it. I had spent a lifetime chained to her demands, bartering my peace for her approval, sacrificing every shred of myself at the altar of her entitlement. To return now would be to surrender the fragile freedom I had finally claimed. At night, Savannah's sultry air pressed heavy against my skin. I would sit by the inn's narrow window, watching lanterns flicker along the street, and wrestle with visions of Madison storming into my sanctuary, eyes wild, voice a whip of venom. In those moments, I feared her more than I loved her. Yet fate is never idle. One evening, Mrs. Caldwell tapped gently at my door. In her hands was another letter, its envelope smudged, its ink blurred from travel. But this time, it was not Madison's hand. It was Daniel's, her husband. His words were not poisoned with rage, but laced with a hollow wariness that bled through every line. "Elaine, she has become unbearable. Madison speaks of you constantly. Your betrayal, your absence, your cruelty. She tells anyone who will listen that you've ruined her life. But the truth, though I hate to admit it, is that she is the architect of her own ruin. The debt grows. She gambles what little we have left, and when she loses, she blames you. I beg you not to return. If you do, she will devour you again. Save yourself, if nothing else." I read his letter once, twice, 3 times. My pulse thundered in my ears. Daniel's warning was clear. Madison's madness was spiraling, and if I stepped back into her orbit, I would be consumed. For the first time in years, I felt not only sorrow but a flicker of something darker, sharper. Almost like defiance, almost like rage. Perhaps my daughter had underestimated me. Perhaps she had forgotten that silence, too, is a weapon. If Madison could not chain me privately, she would destroy me publicly. It began as whispers. Faceless voices trailing across town, little daggers sharpened by her tongue. In New Haven's cafes and parish halls, she painted me as a heartless deserter, a mother who had abandoned her blood in his hour of need. Elaine Simmons vanished like a coward. She sneered to anyone who lent an ear. Left her daughter to drown beneath the weight of loyalty and debt. What kind of mother flees while her child suffers? The venom spread with frightening ease. Old acquaintances, people who had once smiled across pews or waved from porches, began to avert their eyes when my name arose. I could almost feel the condemnation pressing against me from hundreds of miles away. But Madison was not finished. Her next theater of cruelty was social media. Her words broadcast into the abyss where strangers could feed upon the spectacle. She posted photographs from her wedding, staged smiles with Daniel, captions dripping with martyrdom. "While my mother thrives in comfort, we are drowning in misery. She could save us, but she will not." And people believed her. The comments multiplied. How heartless. Blood should be thicker than money. Disown her. I sat at my little desk in Savannah, Daniel's letter folded tightly in my palm, my heart caught between fury and despair. It was not enough for Madison to demand my soul. She needed the world to condemn me as well. But she underestimated the one truth I had finally embraced: silence is not always surrender. Sometimes silence is strategy, because if she wished to drag me into the light, she had forgotten that truth also thrives there. I began to gather. Quietly, deliberately. Letters, receipts, bank statements, every morsel of evidence of the years I had carried her burdens alone. Her debts, her recklessness, her demands that nearly shattered me. Mrs. Caldwell, dear woman, watched me with a wisdom carved from decades of her own storms. One evening, as I tucked another document into the growing folder, she murmured, "Child, you've spent years swallowing fire. Perhaps it's time you let it burn." And in that moment, I knew if Madison wanted war, she would have it. But it would not be waged on her terms. The reckoning did not arrive in whispers, it thundered. One autumn evening, Madison summoned me through a curt message. "Be at the courthouse tomorrow. I'm filing a motion against you for neglect. If you refuse, I'll see to it you never step foot near my children again." I read her words, calm as still water, then slipped the bulging folder of documents into my leather satchel. The years of silence, of bearing her storms alone, had distilled into one unshakable clarity: the truth would speak for itself. The courthouse was a gray fortress, its marble steps slick with rain. Inside, Madison stood radiant in her venom, her hair immaculately curled. Daniel at her side like a marionette carved from shame. She looked at me as though she had already won. "Your Honor," her lawyer began, voice slick as oil, "this woman has willfully abandoned her familial duty. She left her daughter and son-in-law to drown in insurmountable debt. What kind of mother chooses selfishness over blood?" The words floated heavy in the air. For a heartbeat, it felt as if the world leaned in her favor, until I rose. Calmly, deliberately, I placed the folder on the oak table before the judge. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady though my pulse raced, "I did not come here to defend myself with words. I came with proof." One by one, I laid them bare: bank transfers that bore my name, years of medical bills I had covered, credit card statements I had paid down quietly, while Madison and Daniel squandered their income on luxuries. Letters from Daniel himself, pleading for restraint, acknowledging their reckless spending, promising me repayment that never came. And finally, the pièce de assistance, a notarized letter Madison herself had signed 3 years prior, stating she relinquished responsibility for her debts, expecting me to shoulder them instead. The courtroom shifted. A murmur rose like a tide. Madison's face drained of color. "Mrs. Simmons," the judge intoned, his voice cutting through the noise, "you have been carrying your daughter's debts for years." "Yes, Your Honor," I answered. "I did so until I realized it was not saving her. It was enabling her destruction. My silence has been mistaken for weakness. But silence today ends." The judge turned toward Madison, his eyes sharp as glass. "And you, madam, have attempted to weaponize falsehoods against the very woman who carried you. This court does not tolerate such manipulation." Madison's composure shattered. She lunged forward, tears streaking her painted face. "She abandoned me. She was supposed to fix everything. She was supposed to save me." The courtroom stilled as her voice cracked into something raw, something childlike, something utterly broken. But there was no redemption in her confession, only ruin. The motion was dismissed. The accusations disintegrated. I walked out into the rain, my satchel lighter than it had felt in years. On the courthouse steps, Mrs. Caldwell waited. She pressed my hand, her eyes glistening. You gave her every chance, Elaine. But sometimes the kindest mercy is truth laid bare. I gazed out at the gray horizon, rain washing the world clean. Madison's sobs still echoed behind me, a haunting melody of choices she had carved for herself. And for the first time in decades, I breathed deeply. Unshackled, unburdened, unafraid. I had not abandoned my daughter. I had simply refused to drown with her.